Good Tuesday to you, everybody. Income 715. Welcome to boom, week 3. How's everybody doing? Yeah, let's get things started in the right way. Great Smoky Mountains National Park, beautiful, beautiful region of the country. I hope that you get to go there one day. Did I say 751? Did I say 751? I meant 731. All right. I don't know why I keep calling this course 751. I've even typed that. Go figure. All right. Did you have a restful Memorial Day weekend? I hope so. Maybe I spent some time with family. Maybe even, in memorare of those who have passed. I said Memorial Day. Labor Day. Psst, sorry. I do that, and my wife slaps me on the wrist so gently because her birthday is always on Labor Day weekend. So I did get to spend some time with family and celebrating my wife's birthday and, a little bit of time to relax. So it's a shorter week this week. All right. So I did not post the material for this week until yesterday, but it is up, still there's some of you have some questions about Canvas, and that's okay. I mean, if it's how do I get to this and how do I do that? Google's your friend. I'm not saying that I don't want to help you, but I've got a tremendous number of students this semester, and so it's a help to me to help you. If you first just try Googling up the how do I make Canvas do fill in the blank, okay? And if you still can't figure it out, then by all means, of course, ask me. Okay, let's take a look at the material for this coming week. And then in the next video, we'll look at the material that you did last week. We're going to finish our readings in HOKE, that is the Everything Connects work. And, specifically for this week, we're going to wander into an area. So it's chapters 8 and 9 and then the epilogue. We're going to wander into an area that I find when we read this and then we discuss it, many people haven't thought about. You're like, I've never looked at things that way, which is not a bad thing. All right. And specifically, there are, two elements that sort of jump out. One is putting the artistry into everything that you do. And then 2 is idea dating as part of the overall creative process. And people look at that and they go, oh, what? So let me start with the first one. Let me say a little bit about the first one. Okay. It's an interesting historical field that people look at the history of relationships between people and their work, because all creatures work for their survival. Doesn't matter what they are. They have to gather food and find something by way of shelter. If that means hunkering down in the grass, I'm thinking of deer and other ungulates. Or if that means constructing a shelter, say like the bird would, or, people. Here we are. All right. It's work. Okay. But one of the things that those historians that write about the history of work, and there are actually some very interesting histories of work, note is that there was a marked change in how people wrote about and talked about work that started in the late 1700s. Now we're talking about Western society, okay? So, specific to this cultural milieu, this cultural mix, late 1700s, and then really picked up steam through the 1800s, as the 19th and into the 20th century, and specifically an alienation from work. Now, we know, because there were some who wrote about it, that the heavy and repetitious work that is part and parcel of an agrarian society, that is, plant the crops, tend the crops, that is, weed and separate them out, tend to the livestock, harvest the crops, stack the crops. I mean, there's a lot of hard work, and there's a lot of there's not a lot of deep thought that goes into some of this. I mean, especially prior to mechanization. So there's not a lot of deep thought in, say, bringing in the hay. It's just, well, if they're working with a scythe like this, scooping them up, creating hay. That we think of stacks as these round things, but traditionally in the Western world, they've been more like bundled together. Okay. Letting them dry in the field and then hauling them back in to somewhere to be stored for fodder for the animals for the rest of the year. All right. In fact, some who made observations observed that it was mind-numbingly repetitious and dull. All right. But one of the changes that we see in the 18th, 19th, and 20th century is a sense of alienation from work. And that is that the work that we do is not connected to a sense of who we are. We're not villagers that live on a parcel of land that our ancestors have lived on, even if they lived in a state in which they were bound to the land, right? Say as serfs in Western Europe. Not exactly slavery, but there was not a lot of social mobility. And they lived, most of people in the West, and by the way, in continents like Africa, lived and died within a very small radius. You were born in a village, whether that was in what's now Western Africa, and if there were abundant resources, and yours was not a migratory culture that moves, say, following animal herds, as say in Eastern Africa, you pretty much stayed in the same region. So whether you were born in Yorkshire or in the place that's Ivory Coast, you stayed in the same region. You harvested the same sorts of food resources, and you went through the same rituals within the village of coming of age, of marriage, of expectations of family, because the village has to stay populated to do the work, to gather the food, to hunt the animals, or to engage in husbandry, that is the herding of the animals, over and over and over and over, generation down generation down generation. There was a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense that the work that you put in to, say, harvest the crop, whether it was a wild crop or a cultivated crop, whether you were harvesting honey or acorns or a cultivated crop, that this was your crop, that you had a connection to this. As industrialization creeps in, that goes away. Because you may, say, have a job on an assembly line making automobiles in, say, the 1930s. That's not your car. That's not, as the assembly comes down the line and you bolt on a series of successive parts. This was mostly men. That's not your engine. That's not your tire. That's not your shock assembly, suspension. Or in the case of women, many of them were put to work in the garment business, and they sewed whatever the thing was, trousers or dresses or shirts, and they sewed them with collars, just so, all day long, you just sewed collars onto shirts. Those aren't your shirts. They're not your children's shirts, your father's shirts, your husband's shirts. They're just shirts. So the connection that we had to our work becomes more tenuous, and then, in fact, completely disconnected. This is what Hoke is getting at. It's like, okay, given the reality of modern work. And by the way, let me just interject before I get to chapters 8 and 9. This is one of the even with all the craziness that you incur, no doubt, between work and family and this program here at Regent, revel in this time, because this is one of the rare times in your life in which you get to decide on the nature of your work. Like, for instance, the paper that you do for this class, topic's up to you, baby. All right. You get to work on what interests you, and by extension, that is, that it interests you, you have a sense of connection to it. That is a rare opportunity in our work landscape in the 21st century. So back to Hoke, he's saying, those who are most productive are those who feel connected to the work that they do. But what if you're in a job in which, it's not your shirt, it's not your uh, engine, or it's not your spreadsheet, or it's not your database, you're just the IT person, or you're the accountant? What do you do? All right. Well, try to find the artistry in what you do. Think of yourself, look for the characteristics that those who approach their work as a craft rather than a task would cultivate. Briskness in what they do, endurance in what they do, activity in what they do. Try to look for those elements in how you approach your work. And if you are in an organization, and if you're not, and I look, everybody's work situation is their work situation. Okay. So there's nobody passing any judgment. But if you're not in a place where, even in the box that you occupy on the org chart, okay, in which there's room for you to improve the contribution of that position through your contribution, maybe you need to look around for a place where that is. And I and I've gone through that. I've gone through, no, but I have demands placed on me by family and income and mortgages and all that stuff, and I've got to stay right where I am. So, don't turn loose a bird in the hand until you've almost captured another one. So that's not what I'm saying. All right. Because that's being stuck in that sort of spot is soul draining. It just drains the life force out of you. So I want you to pay particular attention to the dating ideas section. This proposition. Again, I just like the word concept because it's so misused. And as you read through that, it's only like a page and a half. Okay, that section. Start thinking about the media that you consume. Start thinking about the people that you associate with and what you say to one another. Start thinking about the events that you would attend, and start asking yourself, does the media that I consume, the people that I associate, and what I say or allow to be said, in other words, participate in a conversation, or the events that I partake in or that I not partake in, do these things build my imagination in my vocation? Do these things build my sense of identity as a Christian man or woman, and the reason, my understanding of the reason that I've been put on this earth, that is vocation? Vocation, we speak of vocation, that comes from the Latin verb vocare, or expressed as a noun, vocatus. It means to be called, the calling, quite literally. There was an old Latin expression among the Romans, and they'd say officium vocat, duty calls to us, to me, right? So if those things that you're participating in do not further that sense of vocation, then the suggestion here is that one or two things might change. You might look at, well, this is the deep think. Change the media that you consume, the people that you associate with, and most importantly, what you talk about. Because if it's negativity, especially about the workplace, or then finally the events that you participate in, then one or two things ought to change. Number one, how it is you approach the work that you're in by way of your vocation, or the work that you're in, does it align with your vocation? And if the answer is no, then it may be time to look somewhere else. I won't name them because they're well known, but I spent almost 3 years at a very large national Well, now they have an international presence, Christian Media Apostolate. And it was a horror show. I mean, how it was run. You know, keeping in mind what our Lord and Savior has to say about hypocrisy and hypocrites. I mean, those scriptural passages from Matthew, I think in particular, you know, chapters 9, 10, and 11, which he's really berating the Pharisees, were often on my mind as I walked through the door of work, which is not what should have been on my mind. Okay. That is how poorly the people were treated versus what it was that the organization was projecting to the public by way of mission and what it did. And finally, I got to the point, you know, I was up in the senior management structure of the organization, and I was spending a lot of time with the head of the organization, and I could not tell whether he knew about the chaos and chose to ignore it for some reason that I couldn't fathom, or that he was because I mean, it was just, you know, how badly people were treating other people, or that he intentionally kept himself ignorant. And I decided that either one of those scenarios, because I couldn't tell which one it was, and if it were either one of those, that was not a place that I wanted to work. And so it was hard, but I left. I left. So that's what's going on with Hoke. Okay, this week. All right. So remember, you know, to make sure that you have the sheet for the semester paper. Okay, if you didn't get it already, you know, make sure, because I posted it in week 2, but if you didn't get it, make sure that you get it. Okay. And in there, remember that we're breaking this into 2 parts. Okay. So the first one's due September 24th, which is what, about 20 something days from now. Okay. And then the last one is due into December. All right. If you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay. All right, everybody. I'm often thinking of you. I'm just as often praying for you. I hope you have a fantastic week. I'll see you in the next video in which we talk about last week's work. All right. And so until then, everybody, have a great day. Bye-bye.